In this tutorial, you'll learn how to make your own hanging fabric organizer with just a few materials and a sewing machine. The materials you'll need for this project are a 1 meter length of home decor fabric, that's 140 centimeters wide, a spool of matching thread, a rotary cutter and cutting mat, or if you don't have those, you can use a pair of scissors, a 13-inch length of a wooden dowel that's about a ½ inch in diameter, and pins. Cut your fabric lengthwise into 4 strips that are 12 inches wide and 2 strips that are 2 1/4 inches wide. You should have about an inch of fabric left at the end that you can discard. Cut 3 of the 12-inch wide strips into panels that are 12 inches by 10 inches, and then use your sewing machine to zigzag, or if you have a serger, you can use a serger, to finish the bottom edge and the top edge of each of those panels to keep them from fraying. Do the same thing with the longer panel that will form the back of the organizer, and then turn that upside down. Take one of your smaller panels and put it upside down on top of the longer panel. Line up the bottom edges and use your sewing machine to sew a ½ inch seam from the bottom of the edges. Turn it so that the back panel is right side up and flip the smaller panel up so both of the right sides are facing upwards, and then use a hot iron to finish that bottom edge. Next, turn that bottom piece right side down, and we're going to press the top edge of that pocket down ½ inch so that we can sew along that edge. Do the same thing with each of the remaining pockets. Hem each of the panels so that you have a nice finished edge along the top of each pocket, and then on the back organizer panel, flip the bottom panel down so that you have the back open to work with, and then take one of the other panels and measure 2 inches from the bottom seam and pin that panel in place. After that, you need to sew along the bottom of that panel ½ inch from the bottom to secure that pocket in place. So I've sewn the second panel to the back of the organizer. You'll notice that I switched to the thread that matches the fabric. To do the zigzagging, we just used white because it doesn't actually get seen, so it's not too big of a deal if it's white. You'll also notice that the bottom of this panel has not been flipped under because that's not going to be visible. You're going to repeat those steps, so flip that next panel down and again measure 2 inches from that bottom seam for your next pocket, and then pin in place and sew ½ inch from the bottom. Repeat that until you've sewn all 9 panels onto the back. Once all the pockets are sewn to the back panel, the sides will still be loose, and so flip all of the panels upwards so that they're facing the right way, and just baste one seam along each edge about 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch from the edge to secure the sides down to the back panel. So even though we basted the side of the organizer, we haven't finished that edge. So that's where the 2 1/4 inch strips are going to come in. We're going to create a binding to go on the side of that organizer. So for the 2 1/4 inch strip, fold the bottom, one of the long edges, up just a little bit less than ½ inch and press that with a hot iron. Do the same thing to the top edge. And then once you've folded the bottom and the top, fold those 2 sides together and iron all the way to the end of that strip. The first step to securing the binding to the organizer is to take the right side and put it right side down onto the organizer. Start from about ½ inch past the bottom of the organizer, because once that's flipped over, you want to finish that bottom edge by tucking that binding under like that. So once you put the right side down, sew a seam about ½ inch from the edge. Then we're going to flip the other side of the binding over, wrap it around the back of the organizer so that you can see on the back it looks like that, it's folded under. And then you're going to use your sewing machine to sew about 1/8 inch from the edge of the front of that binding. So I've finished my top binding. I've made sure to catch the back of the binding in my seam, and I've flipped that end under and tacked it down. To finish the organizer, I've used a piece of the extra fabric to make just another small piece of binding, which I looped into a hook that I can use to hang the organizer, and I sewed it to the middle of the right side about a 1/2 inch from the top. I'm then going to fold the top of that organizer back about 1 inch or 1.5 inches, probably about 1.5 inches, and then I'm going to sew a 1/2 inch from the bottom. The last step is to take the piece of wooden dowel and slide it through the pocket or the tunnel that you've made with your last seam.